So welcome and thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining us here today for an update on the Internet for Nova Scotia Initiative in Cape Breton. We are pleased to host Develop Nova Scotia, who will be presenting this update. My name is Tyler Mathis. I am the Economic Development Officer for the CBRM with the Cape Breton Partnership. One of our primary purposes at the Cape Breton Partnership is to connect Cape Breton entrepreneurs and companies from any industry to supports, information, and resources they need to be successful. Develop Nova Scotia's efforts to improve access to the internet is of great importance to any business or entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur in Cape Breton, so we're excited to hear from them today. Before we get started, I'm going to ask my colleague Jeremy Martel to describe some of the functions of the platform that we're using for today's update. Jeremy?
Thank you very much, Tyler. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming today. We're using the Zoom platform for today's session. So basically what that allows us to do is to have our presenters speak to you. They will be the only ones that you can see or hear, and the rest of the attendees will be just watching. So feel free to get up and get a coffee. We won't be able to see or hear you, so get up, move around, and make sure you keep awake and nice and energized for today's session. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A tool at the bottom of the screen. You can see it there with two speech bubbles toward the bottom of Tyler and I's videos right now. You can type in any questions you have there as soon as you have them. We'll be holding questions until the end of the presentation and getting to them one at a time in due course. You can also use the chat function if you wish, if you want to let us know with any comments, or if there's anything you wanted to add or anything additional you want to ask, or if you're having any technical difficulties, please feel free to use the chat as well. All messages will go directly to us, and we'll keep an eye out and try to help you out as we go. As anything comes up in terms of contact information or emails, we'll also be including links in the chat too, just to keep things moving that way. Again, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll hand it back over to Tyler.
Awesome, thanks, Jeremy. These webinars always go better with lots of questions. So as Jeremy describes, please use that Q&A function and let us know if there's future topics you'd like to see. After the presentation is complete, I'm going to start the questions off and open the floor to Q&A. Please enter those questions as soon as you think of them. As Jeremy mentioned, we'll see them populate on the back end of the webinar. If there's lots of questions, we may not get to all of them, but we will work to include additional information on our website after the webinar if there are some questions that can't be answered immediately. Access to reliable broadband internet is undeniably important to our region, and it's only become more so as we've dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic, social distancing restrictions, and of course, getting used to a lot of meetings just like this one here today. To hear about this update, we're hearing from Deborah Page from Develop Nova Scotia. Deborah's been with Develop, as it's known, since 2017 and is currently the Director of Marketing and Communication. She holds a Bachelor of Public Relations from Mount St. Vincent and has over 30 years of experience in marketing, strategic business management, stakeholder relations, and communications. Thanks for joining us today, Deborah. We look forward to your presentation and hearing from you and your team.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right, awesome. Thanks very much, Tyler.
Thank you.
And Jeremy. I'm so happy to be here and happy to provide an update. I'm joined in the background as well on this call by a number of my colleagues that I wanted to share with you and introduce you to. I am joined by both Janine Basha and Kelly Rose, who are part of the marketing communications team at Develop Nova Scotia. They're going to be making sure that if there's any follow-up that we don't forget to do that. And I'm also joined by Leanne Jennings and Brian Webb, who are our regional representatives and cover off a number of different portions of the province to kind of steward forward some of our more rural projects and projects around Nova Scotia. So again, thanks very much for being here and for inviting us. So I'm going to, I think, share my screen unless it's already shared. It's already shared. Right, got it. Okay, so I'm going to start.
We're just going to get you to click share on the screen there, Deborah.
Did not do that. Did not do that. Okay. Oops, wait. Okay. Just a sec. Hold on 1 second. technical difficulties. I'm gonna have to start it again. Hold on. Should be fine. And share.
Perfect.
Okay, and I will play from the start. Here we go. Okay, is that good?
Yes, it is. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Thanks. Sorry guys. It's always technical. Okay, so I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of background on who we are, in case anybody is wondering. You may be more familiar with the name we used to go by, which is Waterfront Development. We're now Develop Nova Scotia. We have a pan-provincial mandate, and really our work focuses around placemaking, which is a fancy way of saying that we develop places that attract people to Nova Scotia, and we attract them here to live and to visit, to work, and to participate. A lot of our focus is on public lands, public property, public spaces, and infrastructure that enables us, like internet. So we would say that our Crown, it's a Crown corporation of the province of Nova Scotia, and we have a staff group that is filled with a passionate bunch of builders of things and community. We're engineers and planners and architects, designers, program and property developers and managers. And we, as I said, build places that attract people to Nova Scotia, and we also build community through the participation in the building of those places as well. I'm going to give you a bit of a sense of what we're focused on specifically, and that's in 3 different areas. Thriving communities, which is definitely where we would put the connection of homes and businesses across Nova Scotia for accessibility and connectedness, and that is our Internet for Nova Scotia initiative, but also in building placemaking capacity across the province. We're also focused on creating authentic destinations, both the ones we own and the ones we don't own. So we own the Halifax waterfront and the Lunenburg waterfront, and also on working waterfronts, so supporting the provincial innovation agenda and looking to grow marine-dependent uses in strategic sector growth. So there's a little bit about ourselves, but we're here to talk internet. We get that. So internet for Nova Scotia. Our approach, and this is really kind of key, is that we're focused on results. We're not focused on what technologies are used. We're not focused on who's providing it, really, other than them being capable and experienced in doing so. We're focused on the outcomes and whether those outcomes are the outcomes that are right for Nova Scotia and that they can evolve over time. So I'm going to outline those fairly specifically. So our objective is to provide access to reliable high-speed internet to at least, really more than 95% of Nova Scotia homes and businesses. We know that 100% is likely not feasible. There's going to be a house in some place or a business in a remote area that's not going to be able to be reached. But we are very confident we'll be able to exceed 95%, and we're going to continue to try to get as close to 100% as we can. Our strategy is focused on ensuring that solutions include ongoing investment in networks and can evolve to meet the new technologies. So we want to make sure that the service that is provided on day 1 is just as valuable to you in year 2 than it is on day 1. And that means that it has to evolve as technologies evolve. And so that is all a part of how we've built our strategy and what we're looking at for projects to make sure that is encompassed in those projects. We are also heard very loudly and clearly from a lot of people that we consulted with prior to the initiative getting kind of under full steam, was that folks really wanted to ensure that there was accountability of the service providers to ensure that they deliver what they say they're going to deliver over time. And so we're very focused on that as well. We will sign both contribution agreements and service level agreements with each of our providers. We have already done so and will continue to do so. Those service level agreements will be 10-year agreements, and they will measure the quality of service, the speeds, all kinds of different aspects of the actual service. And they will also measure those at the times when the service is used the most. So it's easy to say, oh, we're delivering a 50 and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and nobody's online. we're measuring at the times when internet is used most, which is kind of dinner time, right after dinner time, those kinds of things. We're also focused on delivering services that at least meet our minimums, and these are CRTC regulated minimum speeds. So for a wired technology, so that's a fiber to the home or a coax to the home, that would be able to deliver a 50 megabit download and a 10 megabit upload at a minimum. And we know most fiber to the home services provide a much greater speed than that. On a wireless technology, and so that includes a signal off a tower or satellite services, they have to meet 25 megabit per second download and 5 megabit per second upload. They also have to show us within a certain period of time how they're going to get from 25 to 50. Because we know that eventually we all want to be at a minimum of 50. And those minimum speeds, again, we expect that those will change over time as for example, if the CRTC says, you know, next year it's not 50 anymore, it's 70, it's 75 or whatever it is, that the service providers have to actually meet those as those change over time. I'll tell you a little bit about our process. And this looks really complicated and awful, but it does give you a sense that we started at 70. So we started at 70% coverage, which was probably, we estimate that to be about 88,000 homes and businesses across Nova Scotia that were unserved or underserved. And I'm gonna pause a bit to explain that because that's a question we often get. So if a home or a business has no access to internet, you are unserved. You are a part of our, those that we are looking to cover. If a home or a business does not have access to kind of technology that can provide minimum speeds, you are underserved. And so that means you are automatically already included in that as well. All of those communities are those that we're looking to cover. And we know where all those are. Hold on. Here we go. So, and the reason why we know where all of that is because of the research that was done in advance by the province, and they produced what's called the Bright Star reports, and they looked at gathering all the data to find out where and at what stage the network was throughout the province and what needed to be done to bring it up to a minimum standard and beyond, and how much it would, you know, relatively how much it would cost, you know, what were some of the ways that they could look at doing that, what was the right role for government. So all of that stuff was done a few years ago, and then the provincial government set aside and committed funds to an arm's length trust called the Nova Scotia Internet Funding Trust, and they put $193 million into that trust. That is there for the purposes of investing in the projects that we're looking at, and we do not make the decisions on how that money is made. Our job is to run the competitive process, do all the due diligence, make recommendations to the trust, and the trust makes a decision as to whether it gets funded or not. So I will tell you that this looks really complicated, but this is the competitive process. So, you know, you pre-qualify companies and other organizations that can do the work, and then you issue a tender, and they issue and they submit proposals, and we evaluate the proposals and we score them, and then we have top ranked proponents, we negotiate a contract, and we announce awards. We have been through this competitive loop almost twice now. We're almost done our second go through it, and I'll provide a little bit more detail as to where we are. And so it's by going through this competitive process that we get as far as we can with the projects to cover off as much of the communities that are out there that need to be serviced, and then we kind of look for solutions for the remaining folks, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So our goal, as you see, is to get greater than 95%. So here are the pre-qualified providers that we have. So we have 15, and they've all had to demonstrate to us that they had experience providing this kind of a service and building this kind of network, that they had the human resources, that they had the financial resources, and that they were basically capable of doing this. All of these folks went through that process, and they're all pre-qualified, and they are the companies that we go out to and say, okay, this is, if we're looking for a call for projects, we go to all of them, and then they choose whether to respond to us or not. And you can see that it's a good mix of large companies, well-known companies, smaller companies, kind of more regional companies. There's also municipalities involved in there, both from a network ownership perspective and also in partnership with other internet service providers, and there are probably organizations there that you might not be as familiar with, but there's lots of different folks out there that are interested in being involved. So we went out for our first round. So it was a first call for projects, and that was done in May of last year. Sorry, and when we did that, here was the approximate number of underserved or unserved households and businesses in each of these communities. Pictou is kind of a different, in a different circumstance because they've got their own project and they're moving forward with that. So you can see that the numbers kind of vary across all of the different areas. So we went out for round one, that closed, and we announced our first round of projects in February. And in that, we had projects in pretty much, I think in almost every zone across Nova Scotia. And it kind of represented about 42,000 homes and businesses. That brought us from about 70% to about 86% covered. And in order to do that, we committed $45 million from the Internet Funding Trust, and we leveraged an additional $56 million from other levels of government, like municipalities, but also from the private sector. Every one of the private sector organizations that bid was expected to invest as well. So we're leveraging the dollars to make the trust dollars go further. All of these projects are underway at the moment, and they're at various stages of being underway. Specifically in your area, I can say that when we announced 3,900 homes and businesses in rural Cape Breton that covered Boulay-Duride, Chalicant, Dingwall, and Inverness. Those were provided by Bell, and it was a fiber to the home solution. And in the CBRM area, there were a couple of different ones. There was one project in the Boysdale area provided by Bell, which is fiber to the home. And then there was a number of other projects that were provided by Seaside, Grand Myra South, Marion Bridge, Lewisburg, Menadieu, and Eskasoni. And that was also a wire to the home service. And in total for that CBRM area, it was 4,700 homes and businesses were being connected. And I'm sure you've seen some of the announcements, for example, in Eskasoni and elsewhere. This work is underway. And for many people, the questions come into us to say, well, we haven't seen anything, we haven't seen any trucks, we haven't gotten a connection, you know, nobody's reached out to us to let us know that they want to provide us service. And so, you know, we often spend a little bit of time talking about the process to actually build out this type of complex infrastructure. It's all front end loaded. So there's a lot of work that gets done behind the scenes before anyone ever sees a connection at a home or a business. And in fact, that's actually usually the very, very last step. There is design, engineering work that has to go in so that they can figure out what their route is and where they'll be able to reach. They have to get on the ground to do that in some cases. Then they have to go through what we call a make-ready process. So they have to figure out what the route is for the fiber network, so the backbone network that needs to be put in to bring the large amounts of data into the community, and then how they're going to ramp off of that to get it to homes and businesses. That requires coordination with Nova Scotia Power and others around pole access. So they have to inspect hundreds of kilometers of pole line. Sometimes they have to replace poles. They are looking at prepping the poles to accept fiber. Then they have to run the fiber, and that all is required to get it to a point where you could actually branch off of it and get it into people's homes and businesses. So all of that work has begun. It's at various stages in various parts of Nova Scotia, and it is ongoing. And we're pushing as quickly as we can to have that roll out quickly. If you haven't seen trucks and so on, that doesn't mean that work's not underway. So we can say that that it is all kind of in process. So once we got through that first round, here's what was remaining for unserved and underserved homes and businesses in Nova Scotia. So you'll note, for example, in Cumberland and Colchester, it went to 0. That's because the project that was proposed there in partnership with those counties as well as ExploreNet basically covered off all of the unserved and underserved homes and businesses in that area. So those goes to 0. You can see that there's still a fair amount within Cape Breton and CBRM to be covered, and we're very optimistic that this next round that closed recently will have some good news in that area as well. But I'll provide a little more information on that in a second. So we often say that this isn't something that any of us do alone. I think I talked about leveraging funds from other organizations and other levels of government. You may be aware that there are a number of federal programs that have been announced, both through the CRTC and through ISED, and that would have been where some of those like broadband, Canadian broadband projects and things like that would have stemmed out of those federal departments. We are in constant contact with those federal partners, and we are doing a lot of exchanging of data, so they know where we're building, we know where they're building, and what they're funding, so that we don't double fund if we don't need to make it happen, but we are talking to them about how best to leverage those funds when it comes time for that. So far we haven't required it, but that may be necessary in the future. We also like to make sure that people know that there are municipalities who will contribute funding to the project in their area, and there are other municipalities that don't or cannot. And none of that impacts. It doesn't put anyone at a disadvantage. Our job is to cover all of Nova Scotia, and it really doesn't make a difference in terms of priority. It doesn't make any of those kinds of differences. It doesn't mean that you are disadvantaged in any way if your municipality does not have funds to contribute. So we just like to make sure that really clear, and make sure that folks aren't sitting around thinking that they're disadvantaged in any way. You may recall that shortly after COVID-19 hit and the Premier and Dr. Strang were doing their regular updates, that the Premier and people raised the issues around internet, considering everyone was trying to educate their kids and work from home and do all of those kinds of things, which we clearly recognize is very challenging when you don't have reliable high-speed internet. Absolutely. And so the Premier had announced an additional $15 million available as incentives, or in order to actually help to accelerate the already approved projects. We went to each of our providers, and we basically asked them, what's it going to take to make it go faster? How do we do this? How do we work together? What can we do? What can you do? What would it require from a monetary perspective, human resource perspective, those kinds of things. And so as a result of that, this is actually a little bit out of date. It's now $3.1 million of additional funding was approved, and it was successful for some projects in moving those faster, and we were able to shave about 6 months faster in a number of those communities. There were none that we were able to move faster in Cape Breton specifically, but we are still looking. We also used some of that money as well to try to provide a little bit of interim relief on some of the wireless networks and I believe that some of those might have been with Seaside. So it would be a very incremental, small change, but we were trying to relieve some of the congestion that went through the roof during COVID by putting a little bit of investment as an interim step into some of those networks to see whether we could even that out a little bit and get people getting closer to what they should be getting until we can get in and put in a new project in that area. So that acceleration kind of impacted around 18,000 homes and businesses. But importantly, the lessons learned by a lot of that work with our partners to see how we might accelerate them will be applied to every project as we move forward to see whether we can move it forward even more quickly. It's a complex project and it's a time-intensive project, but we are looking for every way in which we can speed them up, if at all possible. So, as I said, the RFP2, so the next round of or call for projects, it closed June 5th, and we are going to be making announcements on those projects in August. So we're close. We're very close. Our objective with that was that we put like within days after the announcement of the February projects, we were out to the market again, and we included every remaining community that was unserved or underserved. So we said, tell us what you can cover in these areas. And our hope is that we are able to cover off as much of that as possible in the second round. We are also cognizant that there will likely be small pockets of homes or businesses or both and that will remain unserved after round two. We know at this point that they won't be located in any one area. They're really not more predominant in any region. They're scattered in pockets throughout Nova Scotia. And we are already starting to think about how we move forward and address those areas. We may not necessarily need to go out to market again with a competitive process. Reason being, we've been out twice asking for coverage of the same area. If you've done that, then from a procurement standards perspective, you don't necessarily have to go out again and say, we want another round of projects. You can start by doing it differently. So, for example, we could ask existing providers of projects that have been approved or are underway, could they expand their coverage to cover some of these areas? We could reach out to some of our pre-qualified providers and just solicit a proposal from them for a certain area. So there are a number of different avenues that are open to us to cover off the remaining areas. We will continue to work to get as close to 100% as possible. We won't be done after this next round, and we won't stop until we move that forward and try to get as close to 100% as possible. We get dozens and dozens of inquiries every day. They usually spike after we've done something like this or when there's a media story. And that's all good. We answer every one of them. Sometimes it takes us a few days, and sometimes, we're not able to be as specific as possible with information as people would like. But we do respond, and we'll sign people up for regular updates. We will respond. We make phone calls. We talk to people. We're being as responsive as we can. We were also planning after our last round of announcements to get out into communities and meet with people to answer questions, and we find that to be quite effective. And we were just trying to schedule those when COVID hit, and then obviously we weren't able to travel or hold events or gather people or do any of that stuff from a safety perspective. So those kind of went to the wayside, which is why we're doing a lot more of these. And trying to get the information out there. We do plan now that the minimum or maximum number of people that can be gathered at a physically distanced and safe manner has increased. We plan to follow up the round two announcements within community events where we can actually talk to people one-on-one and provide them information and answer any questions they have. So with that, I'm going to stop because I'm sure people have questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks very much, Deborah, and your team in the background there. It's great to be reminded of a bit of where we've come from, encouraging to see some of the progress made so far, and particularly to see the efforts to ensure that these improvements stick over time. Jeremy, can you refresh people's memory on how they can pose their questions?
Absolutely. So if we already have a few in the queue now, but if you have any questions, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see 2 speech bubbles and a Q, and it'll say beneath them Q&A. If you click on that, you'll be able to type in your question, and we'll get it on our side, and we'll be able to answer them one at a time. So if you have any questions, now is absolutely the time to ask.
Awesome. And maybe I'll just sneak the first question in there. Deborah, as you were kind of saying, some of the myriad of solutions and providers and partners that you have there, has there been a technology or a solution when you were speeding up the process that was a surprise to the team that wasn't contemplated when you first embarked on this project?
So, well, yes. In our second round of pre-qualification, and we had talked to them in the first round too, but they weren't ready to come and be pre-qualified. But in the second round, SpaceX joins us, which is the Elon Musk owned organization. And they're doing work, pretty groundbreaking work around lower satellite work. And they are not yet approved to be an internet service provider in Canada, although that is underway right now. They are working with the CRTC to get approval to be an internet service provider. And so it's interesting. We don't know where it's going to go yet, but we had heard a lot about lower satellites, but we were not aware that anyone was I think as ready as they are to potentially start to look at possibly coming into Canada.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So I think, Jeremy, do you want to have Deborah or her team kind of take those questions themselves, or do you want us to read them out?
I'm totally up to Deborah. Deborah, do you want us to moderate a little bit, or
yeah, sure. Why don't you read them out, and yeah, we're
sure.
happy to do that.
Absolutely. Tyler, did you want to start with them at the top?
Sure. So our first, Flo Campbell, right at the beginning, quick off the starting blocks there. Are there plans for improvements in Judique, Cape Breton Island?
Well, maybe she can answer this question. Do you have access to internet right now, or do you have access to a service that can meet 25 or a 50?
Jeremy, do you want to allow?
She can answer that.
Yeah. Well, give me one moment here. Flo, I'm giving you temporary ability to talk, just to answer that question and to have your question answered.
Okay, well, thank you very much, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We certainly can.
Okay, I've just spent a really frustrating 2 days testing my download speed here and dealing with my service provider, who maybe you wanted to remain nameless, but I get download speed up anywhere between 0.8 and with a high peak of 1.5. So I am currently extremely underserved and paying for the last 10 years for ultra high speed, which I think is the situation with many people here in the Judique community. So yeah, we're underserved.
Yes. Well, by what you're describing to me,
we've been lobbying.
Right. So by what you're describing to me, you would definitely be included in the underserved areas. And so your community, we would have sought a project in your community. I can't at this point tell you whether or not we have one approved for your area, but the hope would be that in our next round of announcements that we'll have a project that could serve your community. If we don't, we know you're there, and we're going to continue to try to figure out how to get service into that area. It sounds to me, based on your speeds and stuff, that you I'm not going to name the provider either unless you want me to. Are you with Seaside? I'm going to anyway.
No, I'm not. I'll name it. I'll probably
Yeah.
safer for me to name it than you.
Got it.
I'm with Bell Alliance, and I've
Okay.
been getting the runaround over the last 2 days, and I've been dealing. They have downloaded their staff to offshore, so I've been dealing with the Philippines, and being very frustrated because these are people who are just doing the service they're hired for. I want to talk to people who are making decisions.
Right.
And so trying to speak to somebody in Canada is extremely difficult.
Yes.
Trying to get any direct facts is extremely difficult. And I've just documented, I've had 5 conversations about my download speeds. And I was told with ultra high speed, and I was told this by 4 staff members in the last 2 days, that I should be getting between 5 and 7, minimum of 5, and more likely 5. Now, this last person I spoke to in New Brunswick half an hour ago kind of laughed me off and said, well, of course, but that's only if it's hardwired. And I said, but not one person has told me that's the speed you get with hardwired, not with wireless. And he said, we don't make any assurances for any kind of speed with wireless. Now I'm thinking, I'm paying way too much money for that kind of flippant attitude and service.
So I can tell you that if what you're supposed to be getting is a 5 or a 7, you're definitely in our areas to be served. So you're absolutely included. You're absolutely included in the call for proposals, both call for proposals that we've done. And so the hope would be that in August we might have a project in your area, and if not, we will be working to figure out how to get to your area with a minimum of a 25 on a wireless or a 50 on a wired. And I can also tell you that it's very frustrating for folks who are trying to deal with this with some of these, especially the larger providers. And the reason being is, and it might not make you feel any better, but the reason being is because the people that are answering the phones are only trained and prepared to answer questions about the services they provide, not about the services they are going to provide. And it's just the way the industry works. That kind of information will only be downloaded to those contact centers when the service is available to be sold, right? And so if a project hasn't yet been identified in your area, then they won't have any information on timing or whether that's coming.
I wasn't asking them for any of that. I wasn't asking them for any of that kind of information, and I realized that they are just information sharers who have no authority in the decision-making process. But surely to God, as somebody who pays my monthly bill, there's somebody who does have authority that I can speak to. So I'll leave it at that. What I hear you say is Judic's going to get served. We're frustrated over here. We're way too nice over here, I think. But I'm hearing from you. We're going to get served, and we're hoping that it's going to be in this next round 2 announcement in August. And if not, we'll be back talking to you. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
That's great. The other thing that we will share, and maybe we'll do it later, is we understand the frustration when you pay for a 5 or a 7 and you're only getting a 0.8 and a 1.5. That particular issue is not something that we can control because we haven't invested in that project. We have no service level agreement with them on that, any of those kinds of things. It is, however, it is governed by the CRTC. It is something they are very focused on and are increasing their focus on it because of the Broadband for Canada initiative. They have introduced I think it's called a promise or a broadband kind of rules or regulations that telecommunications and ISPs are going to have to follow. They're going to be requiring them to actually report more regularly on the speeds that they are providing. So this is something that you should see improve over the next number of years because it is something that the federal government is investing in heavily as well, and that's where the CRTC lives. They're the ones that regulate the telecoms. But by then, hopefully, we'll have a new service for you, and you won't have to worry about it.
Thank you.
Great. So I think our next question is from Sarah Rankin. And Sarah's asking, the minimum standard in Canada right now appears to be 25 megabits per second. Are we saying, or I suppose, are you saying that 70% of Nova Scotians or Nova Scotian households currently have over that standard?
So we're saying it depends on, so there's two different standards. So there's a minimum, and these are set by the CRTC. So what we're saying is that for wired, it's 50, and for wireless, it's 25 as a minimum. And what we know is that 70%, and that's growing now with our new projects, but 70% of Nova Scotians have access to the type of network and equipment that can deliver those minimum standards. That's what we're saying. And so our focus needs to be on the areas that don't have any network, so they have no infrastructure to provide it, or they only have access to infrastructure that could never provide those kinds of speeds.
All right, I'll read the next one from Damien McInnes, and I think Damien said that she just. Oh, sorry, I didn't scroll down, but he had, I think, an update or a follow up on the earlier question on Judic, noting that even with the 3,900 in rural Cape Breton being covered to upgrade their underserved area, that still ranks one of the highest percentages in underserviced regions. And is the goal to focus along Route 19 to Mabu and Port Hood, and that would be in the Judic area too. So I don't know if you want to comment further on it, or if you feel like you've fully answered that.
So yeah, I would say that it's too early to be that specific about a project that we don't even know exists yet. So we're hoping, and what we'll try to do with each of those projects that get announced is cover off as many of the underserved homes and businesses in that community as we can.
Awesome. All right, I'll let Jeremy take the next one there.
So another question from Sarah Rankin. What about communities that already have fiber lines running through them? Is the reason that, and I think this is a very specific situation, but maybe Deborah might have more info. Why are we not allowed to connect to them now? I understand that it takes time to inspect poles, engineer routes, and et cetera. But we do already know that the lines are here and have been for a number of years. So is the reason that they aren't being given access, I suppose, is the end question there.
No. So a couple of things. We hear a lot from people that say, I have a fiber line that runs like at the end of my street, or less than a kilometer away from me, and I don't understand why I can't get connected. And this all has to do with what we would call a market failure from a business perspective. So again, nobody likes this answer, but it is fact and truth. The way in which these organizations run their businesses, they have to make a profit. It's a regulated profit, but they still have to make a profit. And so what they're doing is they're looking at the density of the population that exists there, the number of homes, and so on. And then they're looking at the cost for that connection. So they're looking at how much would it cost for her to branch off that fiber and reach that kind of community and this community and the other community. Where the market breaks down is that there's not enough potential revenue to cover off the capital costs of building the network. So that's what our program is set to fix. So if we go in and invest in those projects, they're investing less of their cash, from a capital perspective, so the cost to actually build it, and then the strategy and the theory is that once that backbone network and all of the infrastructure needed to reach your home and business is put in, then a customer is a customer, and it doesn't really matter where they are. So I'm a customer here in Halifax, you're a customer there in Cape Breton, wherever you happen to be, and it shouldn't matter. We should be treated basically the same. They should have just as much interest in upgrading your service as they have in mine, because they're not then trying to recoup the cost that they've put into building in that infrastructure, if that makes sense. And it also doesn't usually matter who owns the network, because some people believe that, well, it's Eastlinks or it's Bell's or it's so-and-so, so somebody else can't tap into it, which is not true. Any of those organizations that have that backbone network, they're actually legally required to provide other organizations access to the fiber networks in order to actually be able to go in and provide service. So there will be a little bit of, some organizations will kind of tap into other networks to kind of make those connections. But the reason why they won't do it is because there's no business case for them to do it right now. And that's what we're trying to fix.
Awesome, thanks. Next question is from Lynn Langell, and she notes, even though Pictou County has its own initiative, is the municipality still connected to the broader goals of the provincial initiative?
What I would say is that we all have the same overall objective, which is to get high quality, reliable internet to as many Nova Scotians as we can, and from their perspective, to as many of the citizens in their counties. I can tell you that the services that they're suggesting will either meet or exceed the targets that are set through ours as well.
So I think what she might be getting at is, are they tapping into the Internet Trust Fund in the same way then for that project?
Not at this time.
Okay.